Dean Administration Affairs, IIT Bombay, with effect from August 2020. He was also Associate Dean in Infrastructure Planning and Support, IIT Bombay. From 1990 to April 25, 2001, design and development of power transformers and shunt reactors up to 400 kV class, 315 MVA at Crompton Greaves Limited. He is involved in many national and international activities. Some of his consultancy projects are technical consultancy in the area of transformers, analysis and optimization of insulation design in power transformers, computation of reactances, electric and magnetic fields, and unbalanced voltage by transmission lines, theory and applications of low frequency electromagnetics. He had invited for guest lectures and tutorials. He had 2 patents, more than 6 books he has written and published, so many journals in standard conferences, guided many PhD students, and he has several journal papers published, more than 25 papers on his name. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of our institute, and I request you to start our session. Thank you. Over to you, sir. Dr. Kulkarni, sir. I request you to start the session.
Sir, please unmute yourself.
So are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay, so good morning to one and all. So I just wanted to know what is the composition of the audience. Are they mainly faculty, or so that I can orient my lecture in that way? So
sir, more number are for faculty, few are from industry, and PG students are 8 to 10 PG students are there.
Research scholars are also there, sir.
Industry means nearby industry, electrical industry.
Yeah,
yes.
Same field, electrical field, industry.
So I'm going to talk on power transformer diagnostics. So in order to set the tone for the lecture, I will first talk on main causes of failures in transformers, then conventional testing techniques. Then we will get into specialized techniques like partial discharge diagnostics, DP and Furan analysis. Then we will go into time domain and frequency domain dielectric response methods. Then we'll see deformation diagnostic, that is SFRA diagnostics. And then we'll also at the end see how two important accessories of transformers, which are bushings and OLTC, how they are monitored and diagnosed. So, unlike electronic components, power transformer is a fairly mature product, and hence, the technology hasn't changed drastically, but still the challenges are there in design and manufacture of transformers, as well as there are some operational challenges. First of all, there is a continuous increase in ratings and sizes of transformers, but the utilities do not have amount of space to install those transformers. So there will be space limitations in general. So you will have to pack more material in given less space. So the engineering stresses, be it electromagnetic, thermal, structural, they are going to increase because we are packing more power in a lesser space, and that increases all kinds of engineering stresses. And of course, added to this, there is a global competition, and there is a, prices are always sort of falling. So the transformer manufacturers have to continuously optimize. But when they optimize, they have to worry about margins between stress and strength. So if that is not done properly, then material costs will be optimized somewhere where risk is high and transformers may fail, and somewhere else where margins are higher and there is a so-called, I would say, call it as a fat. There, if we don't attack, then this is not going to be good optimization. So from that point of view also, there are associated risks, and one has to really simulate power transformer in simulation softwares or do some kind of investigative testings periodically to understand the stresses and strengths, and then accordingly optimize. Otherwise, this will lead to quality and reliability problems. Then, of course, you need to, apart from optimization, one has to really accurately predict performance parameters. And customers these days are very intelligent, and they would like to more and more about their product. So they will ask more accurate, they will demand more accurate calculations. And this entails manufacturers to really go for three-dimensional simulation softwares. Added to all this, there are increasing power system complexities. For example, distributed generation, the amount of distributed generation is, the percentage is increasing, the penetration of distributed energy sources is increasing. And because of that, many issues are there. For example, the system inertia becomes lower, and that affects various equipments in the system, including transformers. Also, for example, because of rapid changes in the system on the distributed generation side, depending upon which distributed generators like solar and wind they are on or off. The network topology keeps changing dynamically, and that's why it puts constraints on protection system, and protection system has to be judiciously designed to take care of all such eventualities. Now, when it comes to site conditions, there are many stresses that a transformer is subjected to. Harmonics is well known because of various power electronic applications. You have increasing number of harmonics in the system nowadays. Overloading, particularly for distribution transformers, overloading is quite possible, and many distribution transformers basically fail because of overloading and over temperatures and poor maintenance. Then ferroresonance is basically if transformer is connected to system or load through a long cable, then cable capacitance can resonate with inductance, magnetizing inductance of the transformer, and that could lead to very high voltages. Unbalanced conditions, as we all know, could be quite detrimental at the distribution level. As you go towards the generator, the unbalance between the phases comes down. So unbalanced conditions are more applicable to distribution end. Short circuits, of course, through faults, that means faults outside the transformer leading to short circuit currents, and that leading to forces and displacements within the transformer winding and core structure, and eventually that could lead to with each subsequent short circuit, vulnerability of the transformer to like interturn fault, for example, increases. Part winding resonances are the resonances which occur in a section of a winding due to applied high rate of rise, impulse kind of voltage. By the time that impulse voltage travels into the winding, suppose tap winding is at neutral end. So by the time the over voltage reaches that tap winding, its rate of rise reduces, and frequency content, the dominant frequencies in the waveform, they reduce, but that may actually those frequencies, lower frequencies, may match with the corresponding frequencies of a section, like a tap, like for example tap winding. That could lead to very high voltages internally, and the transformers can fail. Then very fast transient over voltages, these are associated with gas insulated substations. Because of very short insulation distances, you may have high rate of rise of over voltages of the order of something like 10 nanoseconds. So although the amplitude of the over voltage may be smaller, since the rate of rise is higher, that could be problematic, particularly for bushings of the transformers. Then geomagnetic disturbances. These are of course not applicable to Indian conditions. These are for example, Arctic regions like near the North Pole and all that, where solar activity is quite common. So the ground potential rises, which has predominant DC component, that leads to saturation of transformer magnetic circuit and associated losses and temperature rises, and that could lead to problems. Next is VCB induced transients. We know vacuum circuit breakers are slowly replacing other types of circuit breakers in low and now medium voltage levels, and because of many advantages of VCB technology compared to conventional oil or air circuit breakers. But then there are associated problems of high rate of rise of restrike voltages and corresponding stressing of insulation, and that leading to failures over a period of time. So there are many VCB switching induced failures of transformers that are reported in literature. And finally, of course, overflexing because of low load conditions, or suddenly if load is rejected, then that could lead to over voltage and overflexing. And again, transformer core may get saturated with high temperature rise, and that could lead to problems. So important components in transformer basically are core, windings, insulation, and structural components. And what are the degradation or irregularities over a period of time that may occur that are listed here. So in core you have hotspots or deformation or displacement possibilities. This deformation displacement can occur during the short circuit forces. The whole core and winding structure is subjected to. Windings, again, there could be deformations and hotspots. If a winding conductor is not properly designed, there could be excessive eddy current losses in winding conductors and corresponding hotspots. Then oil and cellulose insulation can degrade due to moisture, oxygen, temperature, and partial discharges. More about it in later slides. And structural parts can get into issues with hotspots, and oil in the vicinity of the structural parts or even cellulose insulation can get affected because of hotspots in structural parts. And of course, there could be deformations on account of short circuits. Now, this slide basically, I don't want to get into too many details of, design complexities, but this figure, this slide shows, hysteresis loops under, various, conditions and at various sections within the core. So first of all, magnetic circuit of a transformer is asymmetrical because all the three phases are not symmetrically placed with respect to each other. Hence, it is inherently asymmetric. In addition to that, we generally, when we talk of magnetic circuit, we only talk of eddy and hysteresis laws. And that too, we don't actually, a regular designer will not get into details of understanding eddy and hysteresis losses. The designer will generally use some empirical curves or factors and arrive at eddy and hysteresis loss. In fact, he may not even differentiate core loss into the two, and he will have some overall empirical factor of watts per kg to calculate, eddy and the total core loss. But that kind of approach will not be sufficient if one is really interested to optimize transformer design. And for that purpose, you need to really understand this hysteresis phenomena in greater details. So in this first figure on this right hand top, this shows the widening of hysteresis loop at various higher frequencies. Right, so that shows that there is a static hysteresis loss and there is a dynamic hysteresis loss. The dynamic hysteresis loss contains eddy and anomalous losses. Then if you see there is a rolling direction and transverse direction. The grain orientation direction is the rolling direction. So along that, the hysteresis curve is as shown here by this black curve, whereas this red curve shows along the transverse direction. So you can see the hysteresis behavior is quite different in the two orthogonal directions. And then there are, of course, these, local minor loops, that is asymmetric minor loops, and these are symmetric minor loops because of harmonics present in the system. So you may have additional losses. So all these factors are important and need to be analyzed for design optimization or quality enhancement. Then you have what is known as rotational hysteresis loss, which occurs in the T joint of a transformer, the middle joint of intersection of all the three magnetic parts. So there is one magnetic node at this point. So that point is basically you are able to see my cursor, right? Hello? Are you able to see my cursor? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So you are able to see my cursor moving, right? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the T joint is this what I am marking here by this pointer, this and this. So here, because three-phase fluxes, they basically come here and interact, which are 120-degree displaced in time. The flux rotates as shown here in this middle figure. The flux rotates here in this zone, and that leads to what is known as rotational hysteresis losses, and they can be substantial. Now, as I said, earlier, a regular designer will not even probably know what is this rotational hysteresis loss, but the development team or R&D team of that particular industry should understand these losses and give some guidelines as to what extra losses should be considered and all that. If at all you want to optimize the losses, then all these issues will come. Then you have, various other, irregularities in core, like interlaminar eddy currents due to short circuit between laminations, other irregularities due to cross fluxing and bursts, and then effect of manufacturing practices. And more you handle laminations, core laminations, more you are introducing mechanical stresses, and the performance of the core will further deteriorate. So there are various failure mechanisms in magnetic circuit, like multiple or improper groundings, circulating currents in core and clamping structures, unbalanced ampere turns due to various phenomena like half-turn effect, actually uncompensated components in their windings, or high current LV leads, local short circuit due to damage to core laminations, forces, and other things which I have already discussed. Now, if we come to the windings, then you have this, so here we are, as the pictures show here, you can see a winder, winding a huge coil on a big wooden former. So you can see the size of that winding. So we are talking of fairly big transformers, right? And the windings, when are designed, coils when they are designed, the design considerations are often conflicting with each other. Now here I have given 5 examples. First is conductor radius, for example. We know that conductor radius, if it is higher, then dielectric stress will be lower, and dielectric stress will be lower, and then hence you are from high voltage point of view it is better, but from mechanical point of view it will be bad. Higher the radius, then the support at the ends will not be as good, and there could be chances of sort of kind of tilting, or just skewing of the conductors under the action of short circuit forces. So this is one conflict. Second is also paper covering, which is very straightforward. We know higher the paper covering or insulation, lesser will be the corresponding dielectric stress. But then thermal gradient also will be higher, because higher paper covering will not efficiently dissipate the heat of the conductor to the surrounding environment, which includes oil, which is a cooling medium, which takes heat out of windings through the process of convection. Likewise, there are many such conflicting requirements, and that's why windings have to be properly designed to take care of all the engineering aspects, and trade-offs have to be made to basically design windings. So what are failure modes in windings? Part winding resonance, which we already discussed, very fast transient voltages, resonances, short circuit forces, transfer voltages from HV to LV windings, particularly in high voltage ratio transformers, like 400 by, if suppose you have a large generator transformer, 400 by or 21 kV by 400 kV transformer, then transfer voltage from 400 kV to 21 kV can be substantial, and they need to be taken care. Interturn or interdis faults and high thermal gradients. So when it comes to insulation, you have major insulation between windings and magnetic circuit, between windings and tank, between high voltage leads and earth parts like tank. And of course, there are minor insulation like interturn insulation and all that, insulation between turns and all that. So that is minor insulation. So insulating materials basically in transformers are mineral oil conventionally, but these days you will find increasing percentage of transformers with environment friendly oils like natural or synthetic esters. And of course you have baseboard, which is a cellulose based solid insulation. And generally it is known that if transformer is not subjected to any high voltage or short circuits in its life significantly, in the sense that there have been only very occasional things and not really of that type which can be catastrophic, then the only reason that transformer will fail over a period of time is due to aging of insulation. So insulation life is the one which really decides the life of a transformer, life of the transformer. If transformer is aging normally and it is not subjected to sort of stresses which lead to catastrophic failures. So there are principally three aging processes in insulation: oxidation, hydrolysis, and pyrolysis. Oxidation is basically due to exposure to oxygen. Hydrolysis is due to exposure to moisture, and pyrolysis is due to exposure to high temperatures. Then of course there are these accessories and structural parts. The on-load tap changer is the only moving part in transformer, and that's why there could be sort of mechanical failures as mentioned in this slide: contacts wear and tear, burning of transition resistors, basically which enable smooth transition from one tap to the next tap, dielectric failures, and of course friction and erosion of contacts can lead to metal particles getting into oil and eventually causing problems. In case of bushings, there could be problems due to high voltage surges, and I mentioned one of the reasons these days wherever gas insulated substations are installed, the corresponding high rate of rise of voltages could be a problem. Then moisture ingress could be another issue, partial discharges. So tank and frames, basically these are all mechanical parts, but here also many times you see on site, you will see tank getting overheated, curved bolts getting overheated, right? And the reasons for some of those issues are basically inadvertent multiple grounding, or inadequate magnetic or non-magnetic shields that are provided on the inner walls of tank. Now, having understood what are various stresses and causes of failures in transformers, now let us see the conventional and advanced test. So conventionally, since we are talking of oil and cellulose insulation, moisture is measured by using equilibrium chart. Now, what is this equilibrium? Because there is a oil insulation and cellulose insulation, and you have continuous exchange of this moisture between these two insulations as a function of temperature. As temperature goes up, you have more moisture in the oil, and when temperature drops, the moisture migrates from oil to cellulose insulation. So you need to really use equilibrium charts which are available in the literature to really assess moisture in solid insulation when you measure really moisture in oil and you want to guesstimate moisture in cellulose insulation. Karl-Fischer titration is one other method, one more method which can give moisture in cellulose insulation. Then you have a breakdown voltage. This is a very standard way of measuring the quality and impurities in oil. Interfacial tension, acid number, and tan delta. These are also fairly established ways of understanding the the oil quality. Windings, you can test using insulation resistance test and polarization index test. Insulation resistance test is basically DC test, and then you can actually know the total insulation resistance between winding and the ground. And then polarization index can also be a part of one more output of this insulation resistance test, where there is a ratio of resistances at 2 different times during the test. And then that, depending upon the polarization index, one can estimate the condition of transformer insulation. That means how much is the moisture in it. Power factor test is the AC test, which basically also can give you the lossy component of insulation, which is indicative of leakage current in insulation. And then there are, of course, other tests like excitation current tests, which will actually basically suppose you have core, and if suppose one of the limbs is having some problem, then that phase excitation current will be different than the other two phases. And then based on that, you can actually know the condition of core, or even if there is a turn-to-turn fault, then also excitation current test can reveal some interesting diagnostic conclusions. Winding resistance measurement, this is straightforward. If there is a turn-to-turn fault, winding resistance would reflect if significant number of turns are shorted. And then the core insulation resistance test, winding temperature measurement, particle count test to basically understand the number of impurities. And then infrared thermography test to know the hotspots, particularly at on the metal surfaces, and particularly at the joints between winding terminals and further connections. Now we'll get into little bit advanced topics in order of complexity, sort of. The dissolved gas analysis also is very established method. And basically we know that oil and cellulose insulation, when these materials degrade, that leads to evolution of various gases like hydrogen, oxygen, carbon monoxide, and so on. Then there are various methods available in literature, which sort of tell you the kind of problems that can be expected inside the tested transformer based on individual gases or their ratios or the total combustible gas that has been measured. For example, if there is arcing, then predominantly acetylene gas will be detected. And acetylene gas, even a small value of acetylene gas of something like 10 ppm can be quite an alarming figure, and some action needs to be taken immediately if acetylene is detected in appreciable numbers. So overheated cellulose will lead to carbon oxides. PD activity can be related to detected hydrogen, and ethane and ethylene are evolved when overheating of metallic parts occurs. IEEE method basically classifies condition into 4 types depending upon the total dissolved commercial gases. Then there are other methods also like Rogers ratio, IEC method, dual tangle method, which uses 3 key gases and then finds out the position in that triangle and then sort of indicates the possible indicates a possible problem inside the transformer. And now online gas sensors are also commercially available. Initially, only online hydrogen sensor was available, but nowadays there are various gas sensors which can detect multiple gases. Now let us get started with partial discharge diagnostics. We know all that partial discharge is a local failure. It is not a complete failure between the two electrodes. Two high voltage, one high voltage and one ground electrode if it is there with say solid insulation, and if there is a void of a lower dielectric constant, that means if there is a oil void or air void inside a solid insulation, since the dielectric constant of solid insulation is almost 4 times that of air or about 2 times that of oil, correspondingly the electric stress will be higher in case of oil and air void as compared to solids, and hence there could be local breakdown in that air or oil gap, but that may not lead to the complete breakdown because the strength of the solid insulation is good enough, and it will not lead to complete breakdown. But over a period of time, these local discharges, they will keep deteriorating insulation around those voids, and eventually that whole insulation will fail between the two electrodes, and that can lead to a catastrophic failure. So although partial discharges will not lead to immediate failures, over a period of time they could lead to a catastrophic failure. So that they need to be detected and some corrective and preventive actions need to be taken. Now the diagnostic techniques are electrical, acoustic and ultra high frequency method, UHF method. So electrical method is basically apparent charge measurement. You use a large coupling capacitor to supply those charges in case of any irregularity inside the insulation. Then that irregularity will be fed by this coupling capacitor, and those charges which are flowing would be measured, and that would be indicating of some issue inside the insulation. So that's why it is called as apparent charge measurement. The advantage of the electrical partial discharge technique is calibration methods are very well established. Advanced instrumentation and oscilloscopes are available, and noise immunity can be improved by using some what is called as balance detection circuit. But the limitations are the interference can be much higher, and locating partial discharge can be a challenge. Acoustic method is another method which is quite popular among researchers because the cost involved is not much for the sensors, because piezoelectric sensors, they are quite cost effective, and but only thing you need to have more number of them, and some of the issues are wave intensity decrease as a function of distance, and materials which are there, they will attenuate, and that's why the sensitivity of the method to problems deep inside the windings is questionable. So there are some advantages and limitations. Some of them I already mentioned to you. So acoustic method, for example, has online diagnostic capability, which electrical method doesn't have. And but there are some limitations, like I said, attenuation is there. You need multiple sensors. It is less sensitive to partial discharge occurring in inner windings. The third and last method in PD diagnostics is UHF, ultra high frequency method. Basically, it measures radiated signals because of discharges. So you know that any partial discharge is a high frequency disturbance, and with a high rate of rise of with respect to time, although the amplitude is very small, but at the same time it is high rate of rise with time, and it has high frequency content, which basically that it has potential to, so a partial discharge activity has potential to radiate, and those radiated signals can be captured by UHF sensors, which are basically, you can say, they are some kind of antennas which basically capture these signals, and then one can diagnose and locate PD activity. So the limitations are basically, you need to have UHF sensors installed at the manufacturing stage. See, acoustic sensors you could just simply mount on the tank surface, and you can observe, because the pressure waves and corresponding vibration will be actually felt by those acoustic sensors. But the transformer tank being a electromagnetically shielded enclosure structure, so you will not have radiated signal coming out of tank. So we'll have to have some kind of dielectric windows in which, or openings in which you need to install these UHF sensors at the manufacturing stage. And also there will be then complicated algorithm required for locating source of discharges. Now let us get into now insulation diagnostics, proper insulation diagnostics. Now when it comes to deciding life of the insulation, you have two techniques: degree of polymerization and Furan analysis. Degree of polymerization is basically that number indicates the average number of glucose units per cellulose molecule. And this number is something like 1200 to 1400 for new insulation, but it reduces to something like 150 to 200 for severely aged insulation, solid insulation, which is indicative of its end of life condition. But this is like an intrusive method. That means you need to take out the insulation from inside and then do this DP test. So it may not be possible for high voltage transformers, which are actually in service, to open and take the insulation out, do the test, again re-insulate that high voltage lead. So this is a cumbersome procedure. So then what is done is, researchers have found correlation between furan and DP values. Furan contents, basically they are in oil. These are like byproducts of cellulose degradation, which basically get dissolved in oil. So these furans are measured, which is relatively very easy to measure by testing the oil, and then you can indirectly find DP based on measured furan amounts. Now, when it comes to dielectric response, because see, earlier techniques that we saw, that is like polarization index or insulation resistance test or power factor test, these techniques are basically, they just give you one number. So the amount of information that is available for diagnostics and interpretation is limited. Whereas when you go to this time domain and frequency domain response, dielectric response methods, the information that is available to you is significant, and then you can get more useful insight into what is happening inside the transformer. So, so there are basically two methods: RVM, recovery voltage method, and PDC, polarization and depolarization current. So here you need to have reference data sets generated through test on cellular samples with varying degrees of moisture content, temperature, and oil conductivities. And then when you test a transformer with this test, then you compare with these reference curves and then come to some diagnostic conclusions. So if you really see equivalent circuit of a dielectric material, it can be represented by number of R1 and Ris and Cis in parallel as shown here. Basically these all these RC series RC elements which are connected in parallel, they represent polarization phenomena in different parts of the insulating structure. And why these are different? Because if everywhere in the insulation, if the polarization phenomena is sort of identical, then whole thing can be represented by a single R and C in series. But since the insulation condition is generally different in different parts of the insulation, so then you will actually, when you do the test in time domain, you will be able to derive this equivalent circuit wherein each of these Ris and Cis combinations, series combination, will represent different time constants which are indicative of different insulation conditions within the whole insulation domain. Whereas this R0 is the final, when all these capacitances will get charged, whatever capacitances you see in this circuit, and when we are applying the DC voltage, eventually all these capacitances will get charged, and then all those will become open circuited from the electric circuit point of view. The only element that will remain in this circuit will be R0. So V0 upon R0 is the final steady state leakage current that you generally measure. Whereas C0 is the geometric capacitance. That means simply if it is like a parallel plate capacitor, for example, C0 is just simply epsilon 0 into area by the gap. Because why it is only geometric capacitance, because insulation inside that capacitance is represented by all these R1s, C1s, R2, C2s, like that, Ris and Cis. So that basically is representing the insulation. So that's why you have to take only C0 there, pure geometric capacitance. Now, what is this polarization and depolarization technique? Basically, electric dipoles tend to align along the applied field because of polarization phenomena, and then they get depolarized, come back to the original state, try to come back to the original state when field is removed and dielectric is short-circuited. Right, so the polarization and depolarization currents are plotted against time, and they are used as diagnostic indicators. So difference between polarization and depolarization times at short times is indicative of poor oil quality, whereas their difference in long times is indicative of moisture or aged condition. And for a good insulation condition, both the currents should be low. Both the currents overall and the final steady state current should be low. Now the recovery voltage method is there is one more step involved as compared to PDC method, wherein dielectric material is open circuited after the short circuit and recovery or return voltage is measured. And then this recovery voltage can be used, the measured peak of the recovery voltage at different charging and discharging periods can be used effectively to understand insulation condition. If, for example, if it is aged or contaminated insulation, the polarization spectrum obtained by plotting this, measured peak recovery voltage at different times, charging and discharging periods, that polarization spectrum shifts to the left if it is a bad insulation. But there are some, issues with respect to this RBM measurement, which are discussed in the literature. That's why, researchers these days are not really so much excited by this RBM method. So PDC method, in time domain, PDC method is more popular and established now as compared to RBM. So this is what I was, saying. When it is a depolarization and depolarization currents, only these first two steps are there, charging and discharging. So you get polarization current and depolarization current. If you are also, working on recovery voltage method, then you have to have one more step. So in which you measure the recovery voltage. Under, that means here you are actually applying the voltage, step voltage. Here in the second, this thing you are short circuiting. Third case, you are actually open circuiting and measuring the recovery voltage. And this recovery voltage is due to the, some polarized molecules which are on account of moisture. So that is the recovery voltage is indicative of moisture inside the insulation. Now, in any sort of mathematical parlance, also we know in electrical or electronics engineering, you have either you can work in time domain or frequency domain. So it is logical that insulation diagnostic techniques are also like divided into two: time domain and frequency domain. So the earlier two methods that we saw were time domain techniques, PDC and RBM. The frequency domain spectroscopy, FDS, is a frequency domain technique in which you get C, capacitance or tan delta, as a function of wide frequency range, typically from 0.1 millihertz to 1 kilohertz. And then you can actually compare those curves, obtained curves, as a function of frequency with reference curves, and then do diagnostic study. So tan delta as a function of frequency is given by epsilon double dash upon epsilon dash, wherein epsilon double dash and epsilon dash are the imaginary and real parts of complex permeability. So normally, when we say complex there is a typo here. This should be called complex permittivity, imaginary and real parts of complex permittivity, right? So whenever you talk of complex permittivity, that means we are talking of imaginary component and the corresponding losses. So the imaginary component of complex permittivity decides or indicates the losses. So if moisture content is high, then tan delta value will be higher. Epsilon double dash and epsilon dash increase significantly at frequencies less than 100 hertz for edge cellulose. And then epsilon dash double dash may be even more than epsilon dash in low frequency range for low frequency region for a high moisture level. The next topic is on deformation diagnostics, which is popularly known as SFRA, or swept frequency response analysis of windings. Now, we have already sort of discussed that windings can be deformed due to short circuit forces. They can get deformed due to transport induced stresses also, or aging. The conventional methods to know deformation are leakage reactance measurements, because if the windings get deformed, their geometry changes, and that leads to a change in leakage reactance value, and that can be measured, or you can actually do excitation current test for detecting core damages, if any. There is another method called as frequency response of stray losses, because stray losses because of deformation in windings and overall core coil assembly, the leakage field pattern changes, and then that leakage field pattern basically leakage field is the one which induces major losses inside the tank structure because of induced eddy currents. So this frequency, so you have a signature of stray losses as a function of frequency under good condition when transformer is manufactured and tested, and then periodically at site you again do this measurement. So if there is a appreciable difference between this frequency response of stray losses, that means you can sort of predict that windings have moved inside the transformer. Now here, there are again two distinct approaches. One is time domain, analysis and frequency domain analysis. When I say frequency response analysis, it is essentially frequency domain technique. But then there is a time domain technique also, which is called as low voltage impulse. We have impulse test on transformer, which is well known. So this is basically the same technique, but you are applying a very low voltage impulse signal, and then you basically measure the response and the corresponding signature, and then keep comparing that reference signature at later times when transformer needs to be diagnosed after it is subjected to stresses at site, including short circuit stresses. The main disadvantage of this method is you have less data in low frequency region because the frequency content is not uniform in a standard 1.2 by 50 microsecond impulse. And that is the reason that suppose the problem inside the transformer is such that it will basically reflect in a particular frequency range. If that frequency content is less in your applied low voltage impulse, then you will not get enough diagnostic data to predict what is wrong with that transformer. Now coming to the surge frequency response analysis, which is a very popular technique for research also. Many PhDs, hundreds of PhDs have really happened in this area in last 2 decades, and many more will happen in coming times. But still the complete solution to utilities is still not fully there. It is still evolving. The method and the diagnostic interpretation methodologies, they are still evolving, and that's why there is always a scope of research in this method. So here basically you measure either driving point impedance or admittance and plot it as a function of frequency. And then again you have a reference signature, and then later on when you measure again, you compare that with the reference signature, and if there is a significant difference in some frequency range, then you can diagnose and interpret that to be a problem either in the magnetic circuit or windings, depending upon the frequency range in which there is a difference. So for example, low frequency, if there are changes in low frequency, then you can suspect there is no problem in core. If there are changes in mid frequency, then it could be a problem in windings. And if it is high frequency, then there could be problems in leads or stray capacitances or bushing capacitances. Bushings problems can be there. So then there are various methods of comparison: design-based, time-based, and type-based. Time-based is obvious. Same transformer at 2 different times you are comparing. If you do not have that kind of thing, 2 times, the signature for 2 times is not available, then you can go for design-based. That means similar design. Transformer you can actually check or even you can do for, between the phases also you can do, but there are some limitations for in between phase comparisons. The things are not exactly identical for all three phases because transformer is inherently asymmetrical structure as regards three phases are considered. And statistical indicators are generally used to know severity of deviations. Now I'll show you some diagnostic capabilities that we have developed at IIT Bombay. Actually, two PhD students have graduated under my supervision, working on this, swept frequency response analysis. So these are the, coils that we got courtesy Compton Gives Limited, and we did tests on this, and we got in fact 4 coils with four different combinations of series and ground capacitances of windings. And then, for example, here you can see, the frequency response. They are quite different for first is continuous disc coil, then interleaved 1 and interleaved 2 coils. These are the various coil types. The way the windings are wound, that decides the series capacitance. So interleaved 1 and 2 means they are wound in such a way that series capacitance between turns increases, and basically that reduces the influence of ground capacitance. In continuous disc coil, which is the leftmost figure, the series capacitance is smaller and ground influence of ground capacitance is more. That's why you see a lot of resonances and anti-resonances in this region, and that is indicative of the fact that this coil can be vulnerable for failure during any irregularities. So now here, so you can see distinctly that three windings, their frequency response is quite different, and this can be effectively used to distinguish between the winding types, as well as when a fault or irregularity occurs, then these curves will be different, and then you, depending upon where in which frequency zone the difference is observed, one can then guesstimate where the problem actually can be. Now you can actually, for the diagnostic purpose, you can simulate this. Now you can see here in the previous slide, you can see there are in each figure there are two curves, black and blue. Black is the one calculated, that means through simulation, and blue is the one which is measured. Right. So we have developed methodology which can accurately simulate and predict frequency response. Now, having done that, then you have to generate a lot of data as to which factors are quite influential in changing the frequency response, and this will help in diagnostic capabilities. So you can generate various such curves based on variations made, and then try to understand how frequency response changes. And then actually when frequency response for a transformer changes, you can use such knowledge generated through simulations and basically diagnose condition. The final topic is diagnostics of transformer accessories. Now, again, as I said in the beginning, there are two components, main components, on-load tap changer and bushings. So on-load tap changer, we have already discussed this, high maintenance costs are due to all these problems associated with OLTC. This we have discussed earlier. So what are the parameters that can be monitored? Motor current. Where is the motor here? The motor is the one which basically changes automatically it advances or retards the tap position, moves the moving contact. So this is done through a motorized operation. So motor currents are indicative of the condition of the drive mechanism. Then you can also measure the temperature difference between OLTC compartment and main tank. Then you can also detect vibrations and then indirectly, sort of know the condition. Or you can even do dissolved gas analysis of OLTC oil. In large transformers, OLTC compartment is different than the main tank because of the fact that there are more, arcings happening inside the OLTC oil because of tap change, operations. So OLTC compartment oil can be quite bad as compared to the main tank oil. In case of bushings, you have problems occurring due to surges, moisture, partial discharges. And the monitoring and diagnostics techniques, basically they use, detection of moisture or DP test, degree of polymerization test on the transformer, on the OIP. Here I'm basically talking of oil impregnated paper condenser bushing, OIP bushings, which has again cellulose and oil combination. So you can actually do DP test on the insulation and then know the aging. Or you can do polarization depolarization current in time domain or frequency domain spectroscopy in frequency domain for the bushing insulation. If you want to actually do some terminal measurements and compare three bushings in case of a three-phase transformer, then basically you periodically can measure currents through all the three bushings, and ideally all the three currents should add up to zero because this is a three-phase system, but that doesn't happen because of irregularities and some issues in bushings over a period of time. So the current will not exactly add up to zero, and that non-zero value of current can be a good indication of incipient problems inside the bushings. Yeah, so with this, I would like to close my talk. I have covered, in my lecture, what are the barriers. I, in general, explained you what are the challenges in design of transformer. And then I discussed site onerous conditions and kind of stresses and phenomena that transformer is subjected to. Failure mechanism, then I explained. And further, I went on to explain conventional techniques and then advanced techniques. And I hope it was a broad overview, and it would be useful to some of you who want to get more into transformer diagnostics or any other electrical equipment which is has similar degradation phenomena as in transformers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will ask the participant if any query is there, you can ask. Participants can unmute yourself. Anyone from participant? Sir, we received one question that is for polarization index, we are considering that equation, that is IR value. So that IR value, it is considered for 10 minutes and divided by 1 minute. So what is the reason behind that? Why we have to consider it for 10 minutes and 1 minute for polarization index?
Yeah, so it is a part of standardization, because the corresponding polarization index value those who made the standard, they could have, instead of 10 minutes, they could have done 15 minutes and 3 minutes also. But it's a part of standardization. Typically, 10 for a various transformer rating, they would have observed that 10 minute to 1 minute ratio will come in this range. And why the values are different? Because it is like you are applying a DC voltage. So transformer, the corresponding RC combination is there. The capacitance it takes time for capacitor to get charged. And eventual once the capacitance gets charged, then capacitance is open circuited, and your final steady state current is V by R, which is the leakage current to the overall insulation resistance. So now, depending upon the condition of this insulation, an ideal insulation is the one where R is infinity, and it is a pure capacitor. That means no current flows through the resistor. But that doesn't happen because insulation is no insulation is perfect, and there will be some leakage current. So that means the resistance is not infinite. That means you will have some time taken for capacitance to get charged, and then by measuring this R10 to R1 minute, you will get some ratio, and typically it is said that if the ratio is close to 1, then the insulation condition is bad because there is a lot of moisture. It gets charged immediately, and steady state is reached because moisture is too much inside the insulation. Whereas a good insulation has a PI index value between say around say 1.5. Over dried insulation, that means too much dried insulation is also not good because then the mechanical strength may go down. So that's why typically and a polarization index value more than 2 can be questionable by user.
Thank you, sir. Any one participant? So, on behalf of Electrical Engineering Department of KK Wagh Institute of Engineering Education and Research, we are thankful to you, sir, to give research talk in this IoT and its application in a smart grid. I'm very much thankful to you, sir, to provide us the knowledge about the power transformer, the various onerous conditions with the power transformer, then the various failure modes in the winding, and the conventional and advanced test on the transformer, insulation and oil. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I request participants to join at 3 p.m. for the next session. Please join at 3 p.m. sharp. Thank you.